Good morning. I want to, just before we go there, I want to talk a little bit about my story and what motivates me to do what I do, and also what I've learned about education and scaling education innovations by investing in 55 companies over the last 6 years. And I'm going to talk about 3 challenges that the types of companies we like to fund face, and 3 ideas for how you might overcome those challenges that I hope you'll take away. And I want to start by talking a little bit about history. So the Industrial Revolution, in the long run, looks like a fantastic thing. Over the last 250 years, for example, Britain has increased 40 times in productivity and income. But if you look at just the averages, that masks a really important fact, which is that for the first 7 decades after the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, only people that owned capital were actually benefiting from it. Ordinary people's wages stagnated. Middle-aged men, craftsmen, were being replaced by machines and child labor. And there's a great saying by an economist, Carl Benedict Frey, who I like to quote, who said that the Industrial Revolution, yes, was in the long run responsible for railroads, but in the short run was also responsible for the Communist Manifesto, because there was a lot of frustration, a lot of resistance. And why am I telling you this? Because history is repeating itself. So for the last 3 decades, the economic indicators in the US economy have near mirrored the indicators in the British economy at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution in terms of income inequality. So we're approaching levels of income inequality through job displacement and automation that are similar to those in the Industrial Revolution. And it's not just in the US. The World Economic Forum says there's 75 million jobs that are about to be displaced by 2022. And equally, there's more than 100 million jobs that are being created, but those people affected by the displacement aren't necessarily able to take advantage of that. And that is really what's motivating what we do at eMERGE. So we have a fundamental belief that with every technological revolution comes a leap in education as well. So that's how we went from the Industrial Revolution to universal primary and secondary education, because there was an increased return on having more highly educated people. And that's how over the last 70 years we went from university being something that only the elites do to university being something, at least in Western democracies, that's available to the majority and that the majority takes advantage of. And what we care about at eMERGE is, the core driver of what we do is that we believe that we're in the process of another technological leap driven by AI-driven automation. And we need to transform the education system again to be able to meet that and enable as many people as possible to benefit from these new technologies. Oh, I've missed a few slides. Here we go. We invest in what we call engines of opportunities. We see, and this, I'm talking about education for adults. We see education in the past as full-time, resident, expensive, about knowledge. In the future, we see it about being on-demand, online, affordable, and about jobs. And so the engines of opportunity argument that we see is to invest in companies that help institutions adapt to this new lifelong learning world, and on the other, to invest in full-stack challengers to the existing institutions that make this possible. And I founded eMERGE 6 years ago. We're backed by Cambridge University Press, Cambridge Assessment, other strategic investors like JISC, family offices. And we've looked at thousands of companies in the space and made 55 investments in Europe. We're the most active funder of these types of companies in Europe. And there's 3 things that we look for in these investments. The first one is scalable experience. So can you create real outcome for someone on the one hand, but really take it to scale in the other? And there's a tension in that I want to get to. A second is high growth potential. So we're really looking for companies that can go from 0 to 100 in 5 to 10 years, and then make a big impact quickly. And the third one is a huge market opportunity. So we're in the market of venture capital, where we make 6 or 7 investments a year, and we expect 60 or 70% of our capital to return nothing. So for us to actually make a return, for us to be able to raise more capital to continue investing in innovations in the space, we need the companies that do make a return to be outsized winners. And so we're looking for opportunities that are truly able to do that. So I'm going to talk about these three aspects and challenges that I think education technology companies face in them, and then some ideas for overcoming them. So let's start with the first one. So I want to start with the question. So hands up if any of you are, or at any point have felt disillusioned with edtech. Yes, you're allowed to be. You're allowed to be, because there's a lot of buzzwords and personalized learning and MOOCs and so on. And actually, I think if you look at the landscape, there aren't that many companies that are both able to reach scale, make a lot of money, and create a real impact on learners. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine who created a successful edtech company that he sold for $100 million a few years ago. And in this conversation, he said, look, when we're learning, we're faced by definition with our intellectual, the edge of our intellectual comfort area. We're being challenged, and it's scary, and we need the human touch to be able to go through that. And I think that's a great way of summing up why these pre-recorded online content platforms aren't a great way to scale teaching. You don't get a lot of engagement through edtech at the moment. And here's the thought I want to touch on. You know when you walk into a great school, you know that you're in one. This is School 21. They're based in East London. A lot of you might know them. They're an amazing school. They're in a very poor neighborhood. They're one of the best schools in the country. They teach in a multidisciplinary way. And when you walk in there, you really feel like you've drunk a glass of lemon juice. It's energizing. It wakes you up. And it's because there's real engagement, and the kids care about learning. And they've got the culture right. And then you walk into a different school in the same neighborhood. And I was a governor in a school in Hackney, and it's similar teachers, similar backgrounds. You don't get the culture right, and it just doesn't feel like that. And just like being in a physical school doesn't necessarily mean that you get the culture right and that you have engagement. I want to leave you with a thought that I think is really important: that great culture in a learning environment doesn't necessarily require a physical classroom. So if you've never experienced pure 100% online live synchronous teaching environment like at Lambda or at Minerva, I highly recommend you go and attend a class. I think it's one of the most important things as education innovators we can do, because it enables you to overcome a psychological barrier. Because there is one, isn't there? We think an online class that can't possibly be as engaging as a physical classroom like School 21. But I think if you've witnessed these, you can really see that there are real relationships being built. There are people that are frustrated, that have aha moments, that there's engagement, there's real care about learning, and people make real progress. And if we're able to accept for a moment that this could be a possibility, that you could scale teaching to lots more people through online classrooms and not lose the fidelity, not lose the engagement, I think it's a really exciting idea that you could create scalable experiences that really make an impact. And this is how I think about the edtech landscape. The first wave, sort of created before 2010, was all about optimizing workflows. Think LMS. The second one was around scaling content and one-to-one tutoring. And here's where all the disillusionment and problems with edtech lie, because these things don't scale highly impactful teaching experiences. I think what's happening right now is that a lot of companies are really grasping this idea of live synchronous learning and bringing it to the market. And this is happening across vocational training, across higher education, and even in high schools. And I think the jury is still out whether this works, but there's 200 million people over the next 10 years that we're going to be adding to the annual roster of higher education students. There's simply not the infrastructure to serve that many people with physical classrooms. We need to be trying this stuff, and we're excited to back companies that do this. Okay. Let's just put that aside for a moment and think that you have a scalable experience. The next challenge is around reaching high growth, and the edtech market is plagued with long sales cycles and lots of companies that reach maybe 100 schools, 1,000 schools, and never go beyond that. They never go in a 5 to 10 year time frame to real scale, to creating real impact, because there are long sales cycles in this market. You're selling into people that are not used to buying technology. It's very complex to implement this. It takes long training cycles. And so there's a lot of frustration with that, and a lot of companies find it difficult. And if you, as an edtech company, can stand out and show that you are able to convert customers very quickly, you can really differentiate yourself to an investor. So this is London Interdisciplinary School. It's one of our portfolio companies, and they're an amazing university in London. They're creating a new university launching next year, and it's multidisciplinary teaching. Their philosophy is to teach problems, not subjects. But I don't want to go into the content. This is, by the way, founded by the same person who founded School 21, and we're very proud to be involved as investors. But they have students that, from their heart are fanatical about going to this school. But the problem is, how do you convince that student at the end of the day, when they have to make one of the most important choices of their life about where to go to university, that they should go to this university with no credibility, no track record, no brand recognition, and so on. Where you go in part to university. 70% of people that go to university, by the way, say that the primary reason they go is to get a job. 70%. If that's the case, how can LIS convert these students that are passionate about the idea of going through a problem-based curriculum, but who still needs job security, career security? And the way that LIS is doing this, and I think this is a wider lesson for the education market, is by saying, well, we're doing something that's transformative. We're transforming our curriculum, but we're coupling it with something that has gravitas and credibility, which is that we have deep integrations with employer partners that provide paid internships for our students, that provide almost guaranteed job placements after they graduate. And so, this is a lesson that I think we can apply across the wider education space. Hack your way through to change by combining your transformative innovations with something credible, something that has gravitas and recognition. And lastly, market size. So I mentioned earlier, the companies we back, and I realize this doesn't apply to many of you, but I think we can extrapolate some lessons from this. The companies that we back have to have the opportunity to be truly big, outsized companies. And there's a way of thinking about that enables us to basically discount a lot of stuff that comes to us from the get-go. So this is a graph by Point 9 Capital. They're a Berlin-based seed investor, which displays what needs to be true of your company to make $100 million in revenue. So at the bottom on the x-axis, you have the amount of money that you make from one customer per year. On the y-axis, you have the number of customers, therefore, you need per year to be able to make $100 million in revenue. And here's the problem with edtech. The most common price point for edtech is $5,000 to $50,000 per institution, so sitting somewhere in the middle there. And that means that you need near enough 100% of the market if you're selling to schools or universities to be able to reach the scale. So most edtech companies, by definition, given this model, sit on the left of the line, and therefore, by definition, I don't even need to know whether you have a scalable experience. I don't even need to know whether you have high growth potential. I just know that I cannot invest in you, that this model of funding isn't right. And so, if you want to scale with venture capital, which is the value proposition that venture capital brings to you. It's the ability to raise an enormous amount of money quickly to be able to scale your solution. Then you need to be able to show that you are on the line or on to the right of it, and therefore you need to go to the right or up on these two axes. And I think one useful way of thinking about that is this concept of schools, not tools. So if you think about this graphic as sort of the student journey, and again, I think this is probably best viewed from an adult learner's perspective, where you start with program design, you enroll the student, they have a learning experience, they get an outcome, a job in most cases. Most edtech, edtech 1.0, 2.0, focuses on a thin slice in that journey and creates software to help optimize the workflow. And so they're able to only capture a very small amount of the value chain. edtech 3.0, the stuff that we're excited about, flips it around and says, how can we be part of every single element of that experience? How can we take a key transition point in a student's journey, whether it's choosing university or going into a new career, upskilling themselves, and own the entire sort of bucket of value creation for that particular transition phase. And if they're able to do that, they can basically go further to the right on this graph. And so we're excited about these companies. So there you go. There's three challenges, three thoughts I'm leaving you with, and I want to end on a personal anecdote. So the reason I started the company is my father grew up in a family of 6 in a single room in the Soviet Union. He was born during the Second World War. It's a very difficult childhood, and growing up in relative poverty, didn't have shoes to run to school in. And in '79 was able to emigrate to Germany and restart life. And 30 years later, I had the enormous privilege of being able to go to a great university on a scholarship and start my own company and so on. All of that happened through education. Over the last century, education has been really the driver of social mobility for millions of people. And the reason I'm investing in these types of companies is because I think we need to really rethink and create a lifelong learning infrastructure to be able to ensure that it continues to be so in the next century. So if you're interested in working with a venture capital funder, my contact details are there with a bit of info on what kind of funding we provide, and would love to talk.